2, 1.
Welcome in, Husker Extra Podcast. The gang's all back together. It's been a little while. It's been,
what's up, Jack?
Gosh. Hey, guys, there's Sip, there's Parker.
I wanted to ask Palmer a question. Like, does Palmer know that Ben Simmons was on the trade block?
Palmer's a big 76ers guy. So, yeah. Palmer's currently asleep right now, or I would have him in a guest spot here on the podcast.
Yeah, so don't wake him up.
They say never wake a sleeping baby, so I'm not going to do that.
But I'm not sure I want to introduce him just yet.
Yeah, you don't want to just give the people what they want immediately. You got to give them to them in a little bit of a taste from time to time. So
he knows about the James Harden trade, though.
Not a Beard fan. He's not a fan of the beard.
He's not.
Thinks he's selfish. Yeah.
Selfish.
Yeah. This is Palmer talking. I'm just the messenger. I'm just relaying what he's telling me as we're watching SportsCenter at 10 o'clock.
He's not as selfish as Kyrie.
Well, no, but Kyrie's also insane. So.
Palmer ripped off some
Husker Extra
tweets.
NBA podcast.
All right, let's launch. Launch.
It's January 14th. It's 3:43 p.m. There's nothing really happening. It's the offseason in football, right? It's been a slow week. It's not been a slow week, of course. The latest news coming out today, special teams consultant. Is it consultant? Is that what they call it? Analyst, senior analyst. Jonathan Rutledge, no longer with Nebraska after 1 year and another disastrous year for Nebraska on special teams. It's kind of the latest, I guess, domino to fall here in the offseason here this week. So I'll turn it over to you guys. Obviously, Nebraska's special teams were a disaster again in 2020. It sounds like what Jonathan Rutledge was hurt by not being able to be on the field with his guys and get things organized. I guess just your guys' thoughts on how that kind of all went down today.
Go ahead, Parker.
Well, I mean, that was the deal from the start. I mean, that was part of the gamble in having a setup where you have an analyst that's sort of in charge of implementing scheme, is that they're not allowed to actively coach players during practice or on game days. So, it'll be interesting. We can talk. I mean, I don't think Jonathan Rutledge really like a household name necessarily. He's not even a full-time assistant coach, but clearly was, a big part of, it was one of the storylines of last offseason was his hire. So we can muse a little bit on maybe what will come on the special teams front. There's a few different things that Nebraska could do there. And I think it's going to be an interesting, I don't know if it'll be a few days or a couple weeks or a few weeks or what, but certainly between now and the time spring ball starts, that will be an area that needs to be addressed by Scott Frost in terms of the direction he wants to go on that. But yeah, it's sort of just like the latest in a crazy week. So today, earlier before Jonathan Rutledge, Will Honus announced he was coming back. He's the latest in a string of defensive players to say they're coming back. So far, just this week, on Monday, Wan'Dale Robinson transferred out, and Samari Toure, the graduate transfer receiver from Montana, committed. Matt Farniok announced he was going to go to the NFL. Then on Tuesday, Dedrick Mills announced he was going to the NFL, but Markmarquis Stepp, the USC running back, committed to transfer in. On Wednesday, Deontay Williams and Markel Dismuke said they were coming back, which gives Nebraska their two senior safeties back in 2021. And then today, I mean, like you say, it's 3:46 p.m. now, Sipple. We've got Will Honus back and Jonathan Rutledge out. So it's been that kind of week.
Well, I think in college football now, this is the way it's going to be in January. I think there's typically coaching moves that are made even when the seasons are going well. There can be coaching moves made. The transfer portal has changed everything, and there'll be player movement all the time. Now, there won't be you're not going to have a bunch of seniors coming back because of a pandemic, but I think this is going to be pretty common going forward. Maybe not to this extent, but that portal that's really something that's going to change the. Come on, I mean it's already changed the landscape of college football dramatically.
It has. I mean, the sheer number of players. I mean, it's changed. It's really changed. I think maybe this year more than ever, but you'd imagine that this will be the case going forward. And I think the pandemic and the extra year of eligibility and all that, that obviously has an effect this year, but I think it's going to change the way teams allocate their scholarships. I mean, you see, Nebraska's got 20 high school players as part of their recruiting class right now that could maybe add one more if they can get somebody that's at the very top of their board, like Avante Dickerson from Omaha West Side, to sign in February. But other than that, they're really that would give them 21 high school players and 4 spots for transfers. If they don't land Avante Dickerson, it'll be 20 and 5. Nebraska's used 3 of those spots now with Chris Kolarovic, the Northern Iowa linebacker, and then just this week, Samari Toure, the receiver, and Markmarquis Stepp, the running back. So there are so many players in the portal. There's just not that many scholarships to go around. I think you're going to see teams leave more and more spots open in their recruiting classes. And that in turn, I mean, if every Division I school in the country were to go from averaging signing 22 high school players to signing 20 high school players or something like that, 24 to 22, that's a lot of high school kids, right? Whose opportunities are not going to be there scholarship wise. So anyways, it's a crazy.
Here's a question for you guys who are more progressive thinkers than I. What good does the transfer portal do for college football? What's the positive impact it has for the sport of college football?
Well,
help.
It's a great question, Sip. I mean, do we know the answer yet? Because it's such a new thing. I don't know. I don't know if this is the right answer or not, or if there is a right answer yet. But I don't know if we know yet. Like, I think clearly what you'll probably see is some guys that maybe couldn't get on the field at one place, find an opportunity at a different place, and turn into stars. Or
that could happen.
It could happen. Obviously, it's going to be way more difficult for coaches because you're trying to keep a roster together and you're sorting through all that. You're basically adding another layer to your recruiting and all those sorts of things. So it's going to be more difficult there. But yeah, I don't know what the effect's going to be. And we may not get a real good idea until the one-time transfer rule is finally passed. Obviously, that got put on the table this week. And I think that's going to change a lot too.
Yes, it is.
Because I think you're going to see even more guys go into the portal and look for that opportunity. I always think of, the quote that Tim Miles had, the former Nebraska basketball coach, and it was sympathetic to the players in that, you only get a certain amount of time to play college sports, whether it's basketball or football or whatever. And you want to play. You don't want to sit. You don't want a red shirt. You want to get on the field and you're on the court and you want to get reps. So a lot of it, I think, will come down to are guys able to find opportunities to play as early as they can? And do you see more movement among younger guys, or do you see more movement among older guys? I just think it's so early right now that I don't know if there is a good answer to how it will affect, other than I think we're just going to see a lot of movement. We're going to see a lot of people trying to figure it out on the fly.
Yeah,
it's pretty early. It's pretty early to tell.
I think in general, I'm in favor of the freedom of movement. Like, there's a limit to it. I think that the one-time free transfer is that'll help. That'll be a positive development. But I also think, that nothing is black and white, right? I mean, that just doesn't exist, especially when you've got so many players and so many places to play and different levels and all that. But I think, being able to transfer for free once without sitting a year, and then having a blanket after that, if you transfer a second time, you got to sit. That's just the way it is. Like, that to me as a principle is fine. And the portal is a fine way to facilitate that. But I think that part of I also understand the frustration from coaches, and it's not a Nebraska thing. It's just a general, around the country. A lot of guys will say that it's hard to coach players hard now because anything goes wrong and they leave and they go somewhere else. To me, I think the bigger issue at this point and what we're seeing with the portal right now is just that it doesn't, I don't know if kids out there really quite understand what they're getting into when they go into the portal. Like Samari Toure, he's a first team FCS All-American. He knew that he was going to have a market when he went in, and he made like a very calculated decision to do what he did, especially because the Big Sky Conference wasn't even going to play this fall, right? Like Markmarquis Stepp, he had a plan. He was at USC. He put in 3 years there. And for his coach that recruited him to USC left 1 week after he got there, which is the argument for freedom of movement in and of itself right there. But he stuck it out. He stayed there for 3 years, the last 2 of which under Graham Harrell, they were an air raid offense that doesn't really value running backs anyways. So he went to find himself a better situation. Like, those situations are very understandable. What Noah Vedral did a year ago is very understandable. He wanted to play, and he had a great market as soon as he went in the portal. So like, there are countless numbers of examples you can find of kids who thought about it, made a calculated decision, had a plan, had an expectation of what they were getting themselves into, and then maybe it matched their expectation, or maybe it didn't, but they went for it. It seems to me, and this might not be true, but it seems to me that there are also a lot of kids who are just like, forget it, put me in the portal. And then 2 weeks later, there's this shell shock of like, this is not what I thought was going to happen. And that is part of the learning. I think that's part of the learning process of it, right? I mean, it was this in October of 2018 when the portal first like went online. There was this like, wait, so players can just tell compliance they want to be in the portal and the school can't stop it or block it. And that was a good part about it, but there's you can't talk a kid out of it now. If he signs the paper, his name has to be in there in 48 hours. And so it's proliferated. And I think, the wheels just spinning faster maybe than anybody thought that it would.
And it could slow too. I mean, it's still in the very early stages, and it could improve. I know this. I don't know why you'd want to be a college coach now. That's the one thing I ask guys all the time. Why would you want to be a college coach? If you're good enough, wouldn't you? I would think you just want to go to the pros. Because now I think there's so many instances where if you coach a kid hard, you're gonna risk losing him. Because there's that easy access out, and a lot of kids choose it. And it's not like I'm making them up. I hear it all the time from coaches.
Yeah, some of that though, like, isn't that, if you're winning though, I mean, that takes care of a lot of that stuff. Not all of it for sure.
Oh, no.
But I mean, like, I don't know,
you don't think Nick Saban's like coaching dudes hard at Alabama, but they win and they dominate. And they have guys transfer.
Well, we always play the Alabama card because it's the most, they're winning.
It's an extreme case. Yes, it is.
Of course, Alabama, it's like a utopia right now.
Yeah.
But I bet at Notre Dame, it's an issue sometimes. And Oklahoma, there's guys jumping in the portal.
Oh yeah.
So no, I mean, that's a real thing. That's not something I'm making up from my desk in Lincoln. That's a real phenomenon. And it's interesting to me. But I guess it's that's just the world we're in, and you just got to kind of go with it.
So go ahead, Bess.
I was just going to say, it's different now than it was 10 years ago, than it was 25 years ago, than it was 50 years ago. In 1990, recruiting probably looked a lot different than it did in 1975. And we're going, it's a new world, and we're just going to have to deal with it and figure it out. And now we're kind of at that point again, where it's a new world and everybody's going to have to figure it out, whether that's players or coaches. And 10 years from now, 25 years from now, we'll probably be saying the same thing. We'll have gotten so used to the portal and the guys coming and going and leaving and whatever, that the next thing will pop up and you go, it's different, but we'll just have to get used to it. I mean, that's just part of the evolution of it too.
Yeah. Coaches will just have to adjust to it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
There's coaches that have adjusted, right? Like look at Fred Hoiberg and the way he builds a roster in basketball. If they didn't have the transfer portal, who knows what their roster would look like?
Oh God. Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's a deal where like we said, you adapt to it and you figure it out and you go from there.
We don't need to get too far into like the weeds in terms of like the numbers and all that, but it does make it interesting. So like if you're a program like Nebraska, where now Nebraska they've taken full recruiting classes for a couple of years now. So they don't have extra spots to backfill it really makes for a numbers crunch on, you're always going to have, as long as the NCAA, unless the NCAA takes action and adds some sort of escalator to the number of new scholarship players you can have each year, and that number would probably be tied to like how many transfers you lose. Like, it's always going to be hard to keep as many players as you're losing, right? I mean, Nebraska is going to have far more scholarship players transfer out this offseason than they're going to have, players transfer in. And that goes for a lot of schools around the country. And that's why you've seen gradually since 2018, the number of players in the portal is growing and growing and growing, even compared to the number of available scholarships that there are out there to come in. Like, you have to be really good right now for a school to take you over a recruit that they're, like Ronald Delancey. It's nothing against Ronald Delancey, but what college is going to take Ronald Delancey and say, yeah, we think he's a lot better than the other 3-star defensive back that they've been recruiting for a year?
Right. They've invested in.
Right. So, and he ended up at Toledo, and hopefully he has a great career and he's really happy there and all of that. Like, that's fine. He maybe made a move that he'll look back and say, that's the best thing I ever did. And if he does, more power to him. That's great. But there's just a lot of players that have transferred, and there's not that many scholarships to go around. So it makes it essentially, it looks like a buyer's market, right? The schools have options in terms of, hey, if you're looking for a running back, or if you're looking for and I think you can see the result of this really plainly. I mean, 2 years ago, when you were looking, Nebraska was like, their strategy was basically like, let's just take the best player we can find on the transfer market. And they found a couple of guys that had connections to the program, like Trey Neal, who they'd coached at Central Florida, like Darian Daniels, whose brother obviously was here, Kanavai Noah, who had staff connections. And this year, they just go right out and land 2 guys at positions where they really need players.
Right.
And there's guys who have like produced at the college level that they're able to just get in the conversation with without having all that much in the way of connections to. And they come away with a receiver in Samori Toure, who had 1,500 yards in 2019 for Montana, and a running back, Markmarquis Stepp, who averaged 5 yards a carry over 3 seasons at USC. And we can talk about the players headed out to Sipple, but it makes for, there's going to be a lot of interesting questions about Nebraska's offense, I guess, and the changes to it going forward.
Well, when you talk about Toure and Markmarquis Stepp, I mean, that's in a sense, I would say that's a positive element for college football, that sort of movement. I mean, it certainly is for Nebraska, that they were able to go identify 2 guys at positions of need really bad. They really needed a big running back. And obviously, right on the heels of Wan'Dale leaving, they needed someone in that receivers room that can give them a big play threat. They needed that whether Wan'Dale was here or not. Right. So, you could look at it in a very positive way, that teams have that availability to go into sort of like a waiver wire, right? I mean, and get what they need.
Yeah. And, part of it too, eventually like the market corrects itself, right? Like to Parker's point out, there's more players than there are scholarships. Like eventually the water's going to find its level. And maybe you eventually see fewer guys moving around because they start to realize that there just aren't that many opportunities.
Right.
And they're going to drop down to FCS or Division II or whatever it may be. So I think there's that part of it to consider too. And that's part of why I say, it's so early to think about how this might work, because it might take a few years for the market just to correct itself and for the bounce to be found.
When did the portal come into effect officially, Parker?
October 15th, 2018.
Wow, that's impressive. Wow.
Well, it's impressive that our son would know that. October 15th of 2018. So, yeah, we are in the very early stages.
4 days after Greg Bell negotiated his transfer away from Nebraska with many restrictions, when he could have just waited 4 days and been unencumbered in the portal.
He didn't have a good advisor. What else are we talking about today?
Well, Do you guys want to expand more on the guys that are coming in, or should we talk about the guys that have left, or the defensive guys? We've seen so many defensive guys decide to come back.
I was thinking about this. I want to talk about the defensive guys, but just briefly, I was thinking about this the other day. It's amazing. Like it's such an interesting offseason in part because of the senior decisions in which, for the most part on defense, there's a bunch of guys coming back, which we'll get to. But I was thinking about offensively, like in a normal year, at the end of this season, you wouldn't have even thought much about Matt Farniok or Brendan Hymas or Bo Wilson because they're seniors and they'd be gone. But I think it's pretty interesting to consider how many games those three guys have started that are gone out. And then on top of that, Dedrick Mills and Wan'Dale Robinson. And I was sort of struck as the chips have fallen this week, and then the two guys coming in, about what, I mean, it's going to be, that's a pretty substantial revamp on offense. I mean, two longtime starters who had 72 combined career starts, plus Bo Wilson, who had 20 or 30 himself.
Yeah,
so
20 plus.
20 plus. So, 90 plus starts on the offensive line is not going to be there when they all show up this weekend to start their winter conditioning program. And the guy who's been the primary running back the last 2 years is going to be there. And the guy who, according to my math, Wan'Dale Robinson in the last 2 years, 24.8% of Nebraska's offensive snaps have been to Wan'Dale Robinson, targets and carries the past 2 years. So a quarter of their offensive production or plays, a quarter of their plays since Wan'Dale Robinson got to campus have been specifically to him to get the ball in his hands.
Wow.
Wow. Huge use. That's
just amazing.
Sort of finally hit me like how much different they're going to be on offense next year than they were this year. And that's, I don't know if you can, I wouldn't wring my hands about that too much, just for the simple fact that they haven't been that good on offense. So,
Parker, think about what we're saying. It's going to be a lot different. And how many people do you hear that think it's going to be better?
Yeah, I mean,
you got to kind of have an imagination to think it's going to be better. And they averaged 23 points a game last season, which was 116th nationally, and 5 fewer than they averaged the year before. Now, could it be? I mean, maybe it would be a fun enterprise to say, all right, here's how they could be better. I wonder if I wrote that column, what kind of reaction it would get, though.
Well, I'm sure it'd be reasoned and rational, like most things in Husker Nation.
No, I think you're totally right. I guess I don't want this to sound like too, like it's going to sound a little bit blunt, but like it's going to be hard for them to be much worse than they were in 2020. And they averaged 23 points a game.
Yeah, I know.
They had 3 passing touchdowns, right? Is that what it was?
Let's talk about something more pleasant, like 60 mile an hour.
If they can't,
like the impending blizzard.
Wan'Dale Robinson or not, if they're averaging, like if they average less than half a touchdown pass per game over the entire 2021 season, I will be surprised. I just will be if they're that bad again. How about that?
What if they only throw 3 touchdowns again next year in like 12 games?
All right.
That's enough.
Yes. Pleasant.
Speaking of pleasant, hey, you know what is pleasant? There's a bunch of defensive dudes coming back. Nebraska's top 8 tacklers, both the safeties coming back. Will Honus announcing today after he had a really nice year this year and kind of took a step forward. So
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm good at asking questions.
You are.
Yes.
Could in year 4, could Frost maybe is the best avenue to get to 6 wins and compete for a division title to lean on defense and special teams?
No, because what special teams proven they can do for you, Sip? You're going to lean on a group that gives up about
you would
3 or 4
have to bank on significant improvement.
Can't
but isn't it more likely that they would improve significantly on special teams than they would on offense?
I don't know. They're both pretty bad.
Is that what would like? I don't know that I disagree with you, but I'm curious why you would think that.
Like what? Yeah, no, and he's right. Like, what have you seen
Parker.
in 3 years that says Nebraska's going to be better on special?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
they're
Like, is
bad
that
every
column?
year.
How's that column? How does that?
It
Yeah,
would
let's
require
write that column and let's get the response to that.
it would require some major changes, but I they have
I mean,
to
they
be
hired
thinking about it.
a new analyst
Okay,
in the
come on.
offseason for special
Let's be
teams.
serious about this. When they go into Oklahoma, when they go into Norman.
September 18th.
Okay, if I'm Frost, every freaking day I'm thinking about Norman because you can't go to Norman and get embarrassed, and you better figure out a way not to. And one way would be we're gonna play very good defense. We're gonna get our special teams in order. Because I don't know if we're gonna go down there offensively. Boomer's gotten pretty good on defense, and it'll be tough. I don't know, Frost. These are the kind of conversations I hope he's having over there with those guys.
Well, how much of a change do you see in the offense? It's become more of the downhill ball control. I know they want to go fast, and we want speed, and we want players in space. But you just brought in.
I don't want that.
Ball of a running back.
I don't want players in space and fast pace. You know what I want.
I know what you want. You want them big horses galloping through the field. Is what you want.
I don't. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know what I want.
No, I get what you're saying, but it would take a pretty dramatic shift offensively, I think, for the other two parts of that equation to work out. Like if you're going to lean on your defense, you can't be throwing them out there after a 30-second drive on offense.
That's a good point, Baz.
They've got to be able to be rested and be able to go out there. And the same with special teams. If you're kicking off a lot, that's good because that means you're scoring a lot. But at the same time, your offense it's got to be complementary football, which is that phrase we've kind of heard so much.
It's true.
And you're right, and I think I agree with you too. Like, can they lean on defense next year? Absolutely, they can. And the numbers and the guys coming back that up. But the question is, can you develop special teams enough? Can you develop an offense enough that you can lean on those other two things? I don't know.
I think the defense can do a better job. I mean, you saw this at times in 2020, and I think that the defense can be even better in regards to helping the offense out by putting it in good situations, by keeping it out of really bad situations. You obviously need the special teams in that regard too. I mean, simple things like not getting tackled on a kick return at the 17-yard line. You're just giving away 8 yards that you don't need to give away. They'll literally just give you the ball at the 25-yard line. So you can't have that stuff. I mean, it'd be nice to create some big plays in special teams. It'd be nice to say at a minimum, you can make a team start at the 25 pretty much every time just by kicking the ball into the end zone, which, Connor Culp brought stability to the place kicking game. But the one thing he didn't really do is his touchback rate was 30%, which is marginally better than it was in 2019, but not by much. I think it went from like 26 to 30% or something like that. So, I mean, it's going to take for them to be good, for them to be able to go to a place like Norman and compete with Oklahoma. They're going to need to be able to, play better on offense, to have better special teams. But I do think that, the defense is clearly, driving the train this offseason. We'll see what Ben Stilley decides. But if Ben Stilley decides to come back for his 6th year, they'd have 9 starters back on defense. They've already, with Will Honus announcing, they've got their 8 leading tacklers from last year back on defense. That's the only way that stat's a little misleading is that Colin Miller obviously would have been in the top 8 if he didn't get hurt in the middle of the year. He was a big part of that defense. But you saw Luke Reimer and Will Honus and then Nick Henrich late in the season play pretty well at inside linebacker. You've got some youth in that room, So I don't know. I totally agree with your sentiment, Sipple, that like the defense is it's clearly the strongest unit of the 3 on the team right now as we sit here in January. And it's going to be up to the offense and the special teams, no matter how they, with Jonathan Rutledge is out. So we'll see how they go about, structuring the coaching of the special teams department. But the defense clearly at this point, 9 starters back and what is it? 6 seniors, of whom all of them, if Ben Stilley comes back, would be 6th-year guys. That's defensive coordinator. You don't get that very often. You don't get that kind of veteran unit. So they're going to have to.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing when you think back to when Frost was hired that and now you project forward now that this is the conversation. It's mind-boggling that we're talking about them leaning on defense. That was not the plan.
No,
that was not the plan. But that's where we're at.
In 2018, there was a stretch in the middle of the season where Nebraska was averaging like 8 yards a play. And I think they went through like a 5-game stretch at the end of that losing streak to start the year. And then through the rest of it, where they averaged like 550 yards a game. And scoring went down the next year and then down again in year 3. And their production, per play has steadily gone down in each of the 3 seasons. You just like that trend has to reverse. I mean, there's just no other.
If you're a Nebraska fan, now you can help me with this. If I were thinking of ways that Nebraska can be representable on offense, they could be let's say a top 50 offense. You're banking on Markmarquis Stepp. You really are. You're probably banking on Sevion Morrison and Marvin Scott, I think to a large extent. At receiver, you're banking on Xavier Betts making huge leaps in the offseason. Then who else at receiver? Delonte Brown.
Guy. Yeah.
What was? Yeah. Samari
Toure and Xavier Betts. Like the thing. Okay.
Delonte Brown.
I think there's going to be. We should count the number of times this year that this offseason that some version of. I'm not saying they're going to be better, or let's not make it too much of it. It's just going to be a really interesting group. I don't know if it's going to be good, bad, or somewhere in between. But at receiver, Toure and Betts are both big, long guys that are outside type receivers. You've got, Oliver Martin will have had a full offseason in the program. You might get Levi Falk back in that sort of slot type role. You've got Alante Brown and then Will Nixon, who they really liked, but missed his freshman year because he tore his ACL in July. Then you've got the 3 incoming freshmen. Don't know quite what you're going to get out of them, but it's not certainly unheard of to have receivers that can play as freshmen. And then, at tight end, you've got 2 veterans in Austin Allen and Travis Vokalek. Kurt Rafdal's a veteran. We haven't seen as much of him on the field. And then you've got a guy like Thomas Fidoni coming in as a freshman who will be on campus a week from now. So there's a lot to. It's a chick. We've talked about this for a couple of years now. There's this chicken and egg conversation about, is it quarterback play or is it what's around the quarterbacks? And essentially, you've just got to be better all the way around. Adrian Martinez, Luke McCaffrey, whoever's playing quarterback has to be more efficient than that group was in 2020. The receivers have to be more proficient at getting open and blocking downfield and taking the top off. I mean, everything across the board. And then on the offensive line, you've got to hope that all of those, all of that trial by fire, all of those growing pains, all of that learning experience in 2020 pays off for those guys. For Bryce Benart and Ethan Piper in particular, for Cam Jurgens, who's been a full-time starter now, for a while, and even for guys that maybe haven't been full-time starters but are going to have the opportunity now that, Matt Farniok's gone and who fills that role? For a guy like Turner Corcoran, he's got less experience obviously than Benart and Piper, but you pretty much like it's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy. It's interesting because there's no one player that is going to fix the offense. I mean, the closest thing to it would be if Adrian Martinez came out or whoever plays quarterback, if the quarterback just came out and played like dynamite the entire year. Like that would be the closest thing to a one-stop fix for what's ailed Nebraska on offense. But that really doesn't exist otherwise, because it's going to take a lot of different guys being a full notch or 2 better than the production at that position, than the output at that position from 2020 for them to have a chance to be a good offense in 2021.
So what is happening now is that Nebraska players essentially will reconvene on Saturday. And that's ahead of the start of classes on January 25th. And that's when they begin lifting weights.
Lifting weights. Yes, they're going to go in there and do some curls and some shoulder presses, and they will be Lifting weights.
They're going to have
That's an inside
spotters.
That's an inside joke, Baz. But so they're going to. I guess the proper term is winter conditioning. Winter conditioning.
Of which some of it will include lifting weights.
Right. I asked the other day, Baz, one of the staff members, when they begin lifting weights. And it was met with an interesting response. But and our son picked up on it too.
Sure.
Lifting weights. When you start lifting.
Hang on, I'm
When
going
you
to go lift some weights.
Got him.
It seems like a normal thing to me, actually. All right.
Yeah.
What else is going on?
Nothing. Basketball team's not doing anything.
Basketball's
Yeah,
not
Baz.
going on.
Not there.
Baz, can they practice?
Unclear.
Yeah.
Unclear.
COVID unclear.
It's hard because we don't know who exactly has tested positive, whether it's players, whether it's coaches, whether it's managers, trainers, whatever it may be. Like every other sport, Nebraska kind of keeps all that stuff under wraps. So we don't really know. We don't know how many there are. If you follow some of the players on social media, you'll see a couple of them been over in the gym shooting, at least, if nothing else. So they're whether that's under the supervision of coaches or anything like that, in my eyes, if you're having a pause in team activities, that means you're not practicing, and so
Yep.
we just kind of wait. The next game on the schedule is January 20th, a week from yesterday, against Minnesota. Minnesota just put out a tweet today saying that game would tip off at 6 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. So, that leads you to believe that game's, for now, looking like it's probably going to get played, or at least is planning to be played, which would also lead you to believe that the positive tests in the program aren't the type that are going to keep a bunch of players out for 17 days. If these were announced on Monday, or if this pause was announced on Monday, or whatever it may be. So you kind of have some inklings about what direction this looks like it might be going, but we won't know a whole lot until we talk to Fred Hoiberg, whenever the next time that is. And Fred has not exactly been the type that's gonna, he's not Tom Izzo. Like Tom Izzo the other day said, "Oh yeah, my son's got COVID. He tested positive, so he's out, and his roommate's out." It's not going to be like that.
Jeez.
So it was super hilarious.
Dad, stop that.
God, Dad, jeez.
Did you have to tell everyone?
Yeah, but no, and that's just Nebraska's policy. That's what they did with football. That's what they've done everywhere. It is what it is. We just don't know a whole lot. But you kind of can see some hints here and there that lean toward Nebraska being able to play that game on next Wednesday. And so
Next Wednesday.
Yeah, the 20th, against Minnesota. So, for right now, they wait and we all wait, and we just kind of see what the next few days brings. I'm putting together a story for tomorrow, just talking about, pretty much every team in the Big Ten has been affected by this one way or another, whether they've had to pause games or they've had games paused because of the opponent, whatever. I think there's only one or two teams that have not had any games postponed or canceled yet, and we're 5-6 games into a 20-game conference season. So, it is what it is. It almost seems like it's happening a little more often with basketball than it is with football. And that just maybe because there's more games and there's more opportunities to postpone things. But Fred Hoiberg said this. He said this at the beginning of the year, when the Florida A&M game got canceled. He said, this won't be the last time this happens. And it'll probably be the last time it happens to us. And all you can do is just try and be as safe as you can and hope it doesn't get to you. Well, it got to Nebraska, obviously, first off with Eduardo Andre at the beginning of the season, then Ivan Widrogo last week, and now with the pause in team activities. So, at the end of the day, unless we get specific, X amount of players tested positive or X amount of coaches tested positive, because correct me if I'm wrong, coaches have to sit out 10 days, correct? If they test positive. Players at 17, we know.
Yeah, and it's sort of like football, where part of that 17 days then is the reacclimation period of you're not in isolation for 17 days as long as you don't show symptoms or whatever.
Yeah.
After 7 or 10, and then you sort of start to build back into shape from there.
Yeah. So we'll see. Like I say, it's trending toward Nebraska being on the court a week from now. Now we'll see if we can get there. We'll see if Minnesota can get there safely. We'll see if Nebraska can get there safely. But we're kind of waiting right now. And without Nebraska putting out a lot of that information publicly, it's tough to say just who's testing positive and what that means for as far as guys sitting out.
This is a really difficult season for Fred to develop a team.
It's brutal. Because you rebuilt the roster again. We don't need to rehash that. We know what happened in the offseason. It's a whole bunch of new guys. You had a very strange offseason summer workouts. You had a very strange preseason non-conference slate where you didn't know basically who you were playing until the day before or 2 days before you were playing. And now you've had the interruptions with guys getting sick, or I shouldn't say getting sick, testing positive for the virus. So it's brutal, and you're doing it in the best league in the country, a team that's probably going to have 10, 11, maybe 12 teams in the NCAA tournament. I think if you looked at, and I don't do this, but if you look at Joe Lunardi's projections for the NCAA tournament, I think he has 10 teams in, and then 2 more teams in the first 4 out, and another team in the next 4 out. And if you're counting, that's 13 out of 14 teams, so it was going to be hard no matter what. It's been made harder by everything that's gone on. And now here you are, if you're Nebraska, you're 0-5 in the league. You've lost 21 straight regular season Big Ten games, 22 overall if you throw in the tournament game next year. And you just need something good to happen on the court, at least. You've had some good stuff happen off the court with recruiting and things like that, but you need a win, man. You got to play well. You got to play from ahead. You can't have a game. Sorry, go ahead, Sip.
Well, no, I interrupted you. You can keep going, then I'll add something. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you can't keep playing these games where you're just digging out of a hole every single. Whether it's you're down 18 to Indiana in the first half, or you're down, or you're leading, or you're right there with Michigan State in the second half, and you give up a run. They've just got to find a way to avoid that and have a game where they go out, play well, and win a game. And then you try and build off of that and see what you can do. But it's been a grind for a lot of reasons. And one of those big reasons is Nebraska's just playing from behind every time out.
Well, and it's been when I talk about it's hard to develop a team when there's these pauses, someone like Delano Banton, who's rarely played the point guard position in his life, he needs games at point guard to get a better feel for it. He's done an okay job, but that's a huge adjustment. Feel of the game, making passes at the correct time. That's not an easy position to play. And Fred alluded to that on New Year's Eve, Baz, during the Zoom, that he's just new at the position. Okay, so he needs games. You know who else needs games right now? Derek Walker. Now, Derek Walker was a bit of a revelation to me. I thought that was a better picture than I was expecting. But you know what he needs? He needs games. He needed these 2 games.
Yep.
And now, so he had a pretty nice first game. Parker covered at 10 points. I think he had 3 rebounds. He looked pretty good. He got winded, but he gives them a little something in the middle, but he needed more games right away. And instead, what happens? They get paused. You get paused. And that's what kills you. There's no substitute for playing games. There's no substitute for playing games in the best league in the country, like Nebraska's doing. And that's just the conundrum they're in right now. Now, like you said, they're paused for who knows how many days. So we'll see what comes out of it next week. If Nebraska is able to get back on the court, are they going to be rusty? Or are they going to have to get the whole team kind of back into game shape because they haven't been playing a lot of games, like you just said? And does that put them even further behind? We don't know. It probably will, but we don't know. So Paz, didn't you look at Michigan? Did you envision Michigan being atop the Big Ten right now?
No, that was the last game I covered before I went on paternity leave when they played Nebraska on Christmas Day, and I thought, you know what, they're okay, they're pretty good. They got some guys, but man alive, what they did to Wisconsin the other night, the first team in college basketball history to win 3 games over ranked opponents by at least 19 points. Like, they're dominating teams. And we thought of this conference being so good and so deep, and we talked about Wisconsin and Illinois and Iowa. Nobody was talking about Michigan at the beginning of the year. And now look who's leading the conference, and look who looks like the best team in the conference. It's Michigan. And it's just another illustration of how ridiculously good this conference is. There's even last night, you're watching Northwestern and Ohio State. Northwestern is right there with Ohio State until the last couple minutes. The team that's you're going to finish 13th in the conference ahead of Nebraska at this point. So, yeah, we're beating a dead horse when we say it, but there's no nights off. There's no days off. It's hard. It's hard It's hard enough when you're good. It's really hard when you're trying to build a roster and build continuity,
Right.
build a program. And that's just the conundrum Nebraska and Fred Hoiberg have right now.
Right. And the pauses don't help.
The pauses don't help. The pauses kill you. They absolutely kill you. And everybody's got to deal with it. Michigan State's dealing with it right now. Penn State's had to deal with it, but man, it's hard when you're in Nebraska and you've just got a roster like you have. And
You need those guys together on the court in practices and games. And when those are taken away, it just stunts. I would think Fred would tell you it stunts development a little.
I think that's one of the first questions we have to ask him, whenever we do talk to him. Are you afraid that this did stunt your development? I'd be really interested to hear his answer on that.
Yeah, because they're not, they're Baz. It's a really hard conversation because they're a better team than last year.
Way better.
Yeah, way better, but it's not really showing record-wise. It shows your eyes see it, but it's not showing up in the record,
Yeah. And look, it's a bottom line business at the end of the day, right? It's who you beat and who you don't beat. Nebraska's not beating anybody. And we can sit here and say they look better and they are better, and they are. I think everybody would agree with that, like you said. But man, when you're not winning and you're not able to get on the court, whether it's for practice or for games because you're paused, it's just a double whammy. And like we said, that's just Nebraska's just kind of stuck right now. And there's not a whole lot they can do about it.
All right, Baz.
That was good.
Let's wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Our son Parker's doing a radio interview, so we're kind of closing this out on our own. Appreciate everybody listening in. This is the first time we've been together in, probably a month.
Right. Well, we'll get into more of a routine now.
We will. I'll bring Palmer on next time. He'll give us some James Harden takes. We'll give some.
Ask him what the Sixers should do with Simmons too.
I'll ask him. Yeah, I'll see how he feels about Doc's rotations, how he feels about potentially losing Ben Simmons, and I'll report back next week.
Yeah, ask him about Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons can't shoot. I mean, I don't know what Ben Simmons. I think he's in his third year in the league. It's like he's sort of given up on his jump shot.
Yeah, he's like me. He's given up on his jump shot. That's kind of where I'm at. So,
not giving up on your jump shot.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take